Welcome to Global Justice Report, a new online production of the Center for Global Justice. I'm Cliff Durand. I will be your host. And I'm happy to see a number of people here in the Zoom room. There are others who are viewing this on YouTube. The Center for Global Justice, El Centro para la Justicia Global, is a multinational and bilingual research center in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. The center is devoted to research and learning for a better world. Since 2004, we've been offering educational programs in English for expats and visitors, and programs in Spanish for the larger community. We've also organized educational trips to Chiapas and to Cuba, and seek to promote and educate about cooperatives in the San Miguel area. Our vision is to move control of economic life and relations with Mother Earth from the 1% to the 99%. Coronavirus has set in relief the failure of neoliberal capitalism. Our weekly Global Justice Report will explore various grassroots democratic solutions, including self-management, cooperatives, mutual aid, public banking, and much, much more. Today, after our speakers, there will be a question and answer session. And we encourage you all to participate in that. If you have a question or a comment, you should email that to this email address. Don't put it in the chat box. We probably won't see it there, but I will be monitoring this email address, global.justice.cliff@gmail.com. And I will then relay your question to our speakers. I'll post this address again later when you'll be needing it. But for now, Arundhati Roy has wisely reminded us that historically pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. Well, during these months battling COVID-19, we've been learning a lot. How can we as a society use these lessons to build a better future? We've learned to take care of one another by wearing face masks and practicing physical distancing. We've learned an ethic of caring. We've learned to help one another as unemployment has left many without income for basic food. We've learned the practice of mutual aid. We've learned to value essential workers on whom we depend for our well-being, whether they be doctors, nurses, cleaning people, farm workers, grocery store workers, or delivery people. And we've learned that we are all interconnected. And we've learned much about the weaknesses of our institutions, whether it be a public health system that leaves many without health care, or an economy that leaves many especially vulnerable in a time of crisis. We've learned that government, good and effective government, is necessary to protect us all. We've learned all of this and more. Now we need to figure out how we can use these lessons to build a better future. To assist us in this, we have two fascinating speakers who will be sharing their insights. Our first speaker will be Emily Kawano, co-director of Wellspring Cooperatives and a co-founder of the U.S. Solidarity Economy Network. She has a PhD in economics from University of Massachusetts, Amherst, where she joined the Center for Popular Economics and served as director for 9 years. Our second speaker will be Israeli criminologist and feminist scholar and activist, Erella Shadmi. She is sociologist by training. She's authored of Fortified Land, Police and Policing in Israel, Thinking as a Woman, Women and Feminism in Israel, and her most recent, Mother's Way. So with that as an introduction, let me hand the floor then to Emily, who will be our first speaker. If you will turn on your video and your mic is on, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cliff. It's lovely to be here and see all of these people, although I don't see a lot of faces, but still, it's nice to join you all. Yeah, so I'll be talking about the solidarity economy. I don't know how much familiarity people have with solidarity economy, so I'm going to try to cover the bases and sort of start from ground level, and hopefully we'll have plenty of time for discussion back and forth. I do have some slides to share. So let me see if this will work. Okay, are you seeing this? You're seeing the title slide? Okay. Yeah, so Cliff did a great job sort of setting the scene. I was going to start just by saying, you know, this is a really historic moment, right? Once in a lifetime, once in a generation, where there are these converging crises. So there are others that we can name, but some of the major ones is obviously the pandemic, the racial justice uprisings, climate change, and this rising fascism that we're seeing certainly in the United States as well as other parts of the world. And it's really scary times on the one hand, but we also know that crises also creates opportunities. And the faith in our current dominant economic system of neoliberal capitalism has been shaken to the core, and there are opportunities to present and push for different ways of different economies, different narratives, different visions. So we're hoping to step into that opening. So solidarity economy, I wanted to start off with just a little bit of a visualization exercise. So I am going to invite you to close your eyes, and I'll walk you through a 1-minute visualization. So if you would, close your eyes. Imagine that other world, another world, you know, your future world, your vision has come to pass. You're in your home. What's it look like? What's it feel like? How's it set up? Who do you live with? If anyone. Now, you're stepping out of your door and you're walking outside and you're on your way to some destination. That destination is up to you. So you are traveling to your destination. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you smelling? What are you experiencing? So you're on this journey to your destination. You arrive at your destination. What is it? Is it work, play, social, family, some obligations? Where have you arrived? What are you about to do? What are you about to engage in? What are you feeling? Okay, open your eyes. And let's just have a little bit of just popcorn style sharing. Just really brief. What did you feel? Give us a little snapshot of something you felt or observed. What does that other world look like? Who's going to start? Maybe I'll just start with the people that I see, which is Cliff. Can you share just briefly?
Well, I was walking to a neighborhood coffee shop, living in a wooded area, but a city with other people around, and a house that actually is in a community where I know my neighbors, where we relate to one another, and I run into a number of them at the coffee shop, and I
Nice.
feel very happy about that.
Nice, nice. The next person that I see on my screen is Erella. Can you share what you saw or felt briefly? Or you can pass if you want. You're muted. Erella, you're muted. Still muted. The little mic button should be. Is it a problem for people to unmute while I'm sharing the screen?
Yes, if you took the screen down, it might be easier.
Okay. Erella, can you unmute now and share? Do you want to go ahead, Karsten? Okay.
I didn't have a particular scenario, but I imagined the city is totally reconfigured. That the idea that we would have a city and suburbs and then country after that was gone. That the city was a city with, coffee houses and community centers, but it was very close to natural surroundings on all sides. So it was very easy to get to nature. And even in the middle of the city, there would be a whole sense of nature. So that sense of being in the city and having to get out to nature far away was gone. That's one of the first things that sort of came to me.
Nice, nice. Okay, well, let's do one more. Erella, I can see your mic is active now. So just briefly.
I didn't have a scenario either, but a memory of the last Passover night, Jewish Passover night, came to me. The memory that we were in the pandemic already, and we were at home. Me and my partner, just ourselves, but we have all the family on Zoom, and we sang together. I mean, the Jewish songs, the holiday songs, and I felt so good, so good. I mean, I felt the family, I felt bonding, I felt togetherness, and it was wonderful.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to go back to the screen share. And ask you all to think about your vision. And the question is, what are the values? What are the values, not the things, not the elements, but what are the values that underlie your vision? And if folks can go onto your cell phones or your computers to menti.com, and then you'll be prompted to type in that code. 9118238. So it's menti.com, and the code is 9118238. And let me see if I can share. As people,
It says that the code is wrong.
oh no, darn. All right, look it, let's skip that. Too bad, too bad. All right, well then let me just ask people popcorn style to say what visions, what are key, values that underline your vision? Just go ahead, shout it out.
Community.
Exactly.
Nature.
What else? Wait, somebody else? Community, what else?
Nature.
Respect for the planet.
Nature. Okay, respect for planet. Yep. What else?
Sharing.
Caring or sharing?
Sharing.
Sharing.
Accessibility.
Accessibility. What else?
The value of interconnection,
Interconnection.
people and beyond that.
Right. People and beyond. Good. What else? Values. Values.
Inclusiveness.
Inclusiveness. What else? Let's take a couple more.
Recognizing planet Earth is our common inheritance.
Planet Earth. Okay. Anything else? One last. Okay. Well, that's good. And we could go on. So I do this exercise a lot, and almost invariably we come up with a list that aligns pretty well with solidarity economy principles. So there are a lot of stuff around nature, respect for planet Earth, right? So that's a sustainability. If you look at the bullet points there, the sustainability, there's a lot about accessibility and inclusiveness. So that's equity in all dimensions, race, class, gender, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Sharing, community, interconnection. So that's solidarity, right? And it might also include an element of democracy, so that not only do you have equity, but everybody also has a voice, right? Okay, so it's a nice exercise in that people, if we give it enough time, people do the visioning, and then they identify values, and it inevitably lines up pretty well with these values. So let me backtrack a little bit and say what solidarity economy is. 4 interconnected aspects of the solidarity economy. So it is a broad set of practices. And these practices align with solidarity economy values. So solidarity, cooperation, mutualism, etc. Participatory democracy, so not just voting, but democracy in your communities, your workplace, etc. Equity in all dimensions, as I already mentioned. Sustainability and respect for Mother Earth. And pluralism, and this is important because it means that it's not a one-size-fits-all model. This is not a blueprint. It's not rigid. Different things are going to work in different cultures, different points of history, etc. Okay, so it's a broad set of practices that align with solidarity economy values. It's also a framework that connects these solidarity economy practices in order to articulate, envision a post-capitalist system and world. So as soon as we start saying post-capitalist, we're going beyond the narrow confines of what is the economy to the economy in the original sense of the Greek management of the household. If we think of the management of the household in terms of our entire world and ecosystem, we're really talking about way beyond just the narrow economy of producing goods and services for exchange. We're talking about political systems, social systems, relationships, transforming our relationships to each other, as well as like personal transformation. Okay? And the last thing is it's a global movement to build a solidarity economy. So that's kind of a simple definition of what is the solidarity economy. Solidarity economy practices exist in all economic spheres. So if you look, I'm not going to go through this Prezi. This is actually a kind of an interactive Prezi. Happy to distribute these slides, and then there's a link to the Prezi. So you can zoom in and out, but you can see the major spheres are production or reproduction. And examples are worker cooperatives, producer cooperatives, also the care economy. So unpaid, unwaged care work. So in this sense, almost all of us are part of, we engage in the solidarity economy. We take care of our children, we take care of our parents, we take care of our neighbors, right? Solidarity economy embraces that as important economic activity, even though it's not necessarily monetized. Also, all that kind of DIY stuff. You grow food for yourself, you garden, whatever you build for yourself or your community, together with your community, even if it's not monetized, right? So that's production. In terms of distribution and exchange, all kinds of ways of sharing, whether there's money involved or not. Some kinds of democratic fair trade, alternative currencies or social currencies are a way that you do exchange in a way that's controlled by the local economies. Direct exchange like barter, and to some extent community-supported agriculture. Examples in terms of consumption and use, collective and democratically run examples of consumption like community land trusts, housing co-ops, consumer co-ops, things like collective kitchens. And in terms of finance, examples of solidarity economy are credit unions, which are by definition a form of cooperatives that are in theory controlled by their members, public banks, peer lending, cooperative loan funds, community loan funds. And the big picture of this is that all of this activity of the solidarity economy or any other economic system is embedded in the world and the ecosystem, which is the outermost ring. And governance is what sort of shapes, through policies and institutions, shapes a particular economic system. So governance shapes the solidarity economy, and examples of solidarity economy, democratic, collectively controlled governance are things like participatory budgeting.
I didn't answer.
Sorry? And some things that exist in our current public sphere, like regulations and other institutions. So I'm going to look at these bullet points and say that some of these practices are very old, like cooperatives, whether they were formal or informal, are as old as human beings. And it goes way beyond human beings to the natural world as well. So some things are very old, some are kind of new innovations, some are mainstream, like a lot of that stuff that's in the public sphere, right, are probably keepers in the solidarity economy, right, like public education, national parks, some kind of hopefully universal childcare, universal healthcare, etc. Some things are mainstream and are keepers, but we can debate about that, right? What are keepers and what are not? and some are alternative. So there's all kinds, old, new, mainstream, alternative. The point is that there are solidarity economy practices that exist in all sectors of our economic system. There is a huge foundation upon which to build, but right now, all these practices are sundered from one another, and therefore they're not seen as the foundation for a new system. They're seen as isolated, siloed, cute, laudable experiments. And so I want to just tell a really quick story about Imaginal Cells for those of you that might not know it. So when a caterpillar spins its chrysalis, what happens is that in the chrysalis, it starts decomposing into this kind of goop, right? And in that goop are imaginal cells. And these imaginal cells have a vision of what it could become, right? That's different from the caterpillar. It has this vision. But because these imaginal cells are seen as foreign, they're attacked by the immune system of that goop, right? As the caterpillar is breaking down, it's attacking those imaginal cells. Eventually what happens is those imaginal cells start clumping together. They start finding each other, and in doing so, they become stronger. And then they start articulating different pieces. So one piece becomes the wing, and another group becomes the legs, and others become the eyes, until they start coming together. They are no longer threatened by the immune system, and they emerge as this entirely new creature, right? So from these imaginal cells that are under attack, they come together, they get stronger, they articulate a whole system, they emerge as a butterfly. So I would propose that right now we have lots and lots of imaginal cells, and what solidarity economy is trying to do is get us to recognize each other so that we can work together to emerge as something transformed beyond capitalism. Thank you. Oops. Oh, let me stop the screen share. Okay.
Okay, Emily, that was a very striking image there that you drew for us. Thank you for your presentation. Now let me turn the floor over to Erella Shadmi, who will be talking about her vision and a feminist vision, fundamentally. So I'll give you the floor now, Erella.
Okay, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Emily. It was very, very interesting, very eye-opening. And in many ways, it touches upon some of my ideas or what I'm going to say. If I wish to present what I think in one or two sentences, I would say that the Western civilization. I'm in Israel, and I grew up in Israel, and I live in Israel most of my life, and so I'm part of the Western civilization. But I see the Western civilization paradigm or way of living, way of thinking, collapsing. And the coronavirus, the corona pandemic revealed its the collapse of the Western civilization. it's not only the ecology crisis that we are all familiar with. It's the worst crisis, but it's not the only one. We face many crises in the same time. Many of us, I think most of us, feel insecurity in face of the state betraying us. The state is betraying us. It's privatizing, with neoliberalism, under neoliberalism, privatizing all the services that the state supposed to give us. It privatized all its responsibilities for our safety, for our well-being, for our education, for our health. And we are left to the corporate regime and autocratic governments, that they get powerful and they come in instead of the state, certainly the welfare state. We lost the protection. We stand in facing all the crises. We stand as individuals. We stand ourselves because the family, the union, the state, the ethnicity doesn't protect us anymore. Doesn't give us the community feelings that we used to feel. So we are just ourselves as individuals facing all this crisis, and the pandemic revealed that our vulnerability and our need for bonding, for being together, that my peace depends on your peace, on everybody's peace, and that we are all interconnected. We are all interconnected. The Western paradigm does not respond anymore to our needs and our problems, and we need to leave this Western paradigm behind and to look for alternative ways of thinking outside the Western paradigm. Not only ways of thinking and being and doing and living outside the Western paradigm. I find them, these alternative ways, in three major sources. One is the maternalistic gift economy, the other is the matriarchal legacy, and the third one is the indigenous knowledge. Indigenous knowledge that all of three of them are well known to whoever has open eyes, but the starting point for me is the maternal gift economy. Instead of accumulation of capital and property and the exchange principle promoted by capitalism, the gift economy is a model of free distribution of products and services according to the needs of the other. And it starts with mothering. Mothering, by the way, doesn't have to be done by mothers, or only by women only. It can be done by fathers, it can be done by aunts, it can be done by sisters. That's why I'm using the word mothering, the work mother do. And what mother do is exactly responding to the needs of the baby, of the child, of the daughter, of my daughter, and to the needs, not because I have a kind of essentialist nature, but because that's what the baby needs. The baby cannot survive without without mothering. And this kind of economy, of distribution of services and whatever, it exists all the time everywhere, but we see it particularly on times of trouble and danger, as we see it during the pandemic. It's an economy that promotes and constructs bonding and community among people, but it is denied and exploited by capitalism, which in fact cannot exist without it. Capitalism cannot exist without the gift economy given especially by by women, and some mothering men. And the exchange cannot live up to its promises without the gift economy. But it's denied by capitalism. The fact that gift economy is everywhere, and of course, gift economy is the gifts are given to us by nature first and foremost. By nature, I'm talking about air, I'm talking about water, I'm talking about breath, I'm talking about sun, the heat, everything. The fact that it's everywhere, it means that we are not only Homo sapiens, we are also Homo donans, the giving person, the giving human beings. The giving economy is a major element in, of course, solidarity economy, as you said, but in other alternative economies too. But it's especially I must emphasize that it's a major element in matriarchal heritage, in matriarchal societies. Matriarchy is not a society of power and control, but of peace, balance, partnership, and equality. Living within communities, living within small communities that respect the other and nature, a community that produce freedom while maintaining the individual sovereignty. That's why matriarchy are places of a lot of freedoms. All kinds of freedom are you can practice in or liberties, or what we in matriarchy, including sexual freedom. Matriarchy exists today, such as the Mosu in China, Minangkabau in Indonesia, and the Kazi in India. But it existed also in the pre-patriarchal era, and its remains are found in all society and in all religions, including Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Indigenous knowledge, the third source of my way, you know that it permeates our life as a real alternative for years now. We don't like to acknowledge it, but restorative justice, truth and reconciliation committees, healing practices, spirituality are just a few examples. And also today, scientists begin to understand that that indigenous science is a source of a lot of interesting and important knowledge, especially when we face this ecology crisis. And they begin to recognize it and to give it, to respect it. Indigenous knowledge open to us exactly in these days of the failure of the existing Western models. It opens to us possibilities that have not attracted enough attention so far. For example, community. Community is a central way of life, of living. It's very central among First Nations and matriarchies, of course, and is reflected in such concepts like Ubuntu in South Africa. Being means belonging, or what Desmond Tutu says, a human is a human through other human beings. The community is just as important to me as myself, in contrast to the individualism of the West. and it connects me to the world and nature. The gift economy is the glue that connects community members among themselves and to nature and other communities. These three sources of inspiration, which goes beyond common Eurocentric worldview, outside Eurocentric worldview, share a set of perceptions, structures, practices, and values. They allow us to imagine an alternative moral behavior we all can adapt, but also to imagine the possibility of another society whose foundations are needs, community, sharing, consensual decision-making, inclusion, giving, connectedness, spirituality, reconciliation, peace, balance, and respect to nature. And what's so interesting about it, that the young people, especially young people of Generation Y, intuitively understand it. And they began to apply all this, or some of this, the major elements of this worldview. They began at least 10 years ago, in the 21st century, maybe 20 years ago. I see it in Israel, but I see it all over the world. They began to apply it. They are not to build from below the alternative world. They don't wait to the left to organize and come with new solutions. They just began to build new institutions, new social institutions, and the foundation of a new social order. For example, the gift economy and solidarity economy are very popular among them. In fact, they live in a gift economy society, environment. They practice it on a daily basis. Communal families, they build up communes and collective, or kibbutzim, as we used to call them in Israel, but these are modern kind of kibbutzim, urban communities. They emphasize zoning, localism, instead of nationalism. They build cooperatives for work and housing. They build eco-villages. They build non-academic knowledge production institution, non-academic, outside of academia. They begin to build a new knowledge institute. Like one of them is here in Haifa, in the Feminist Center Isha Leisha, that has been working for quite a few years, and it comes up not only with feminist knowledge, but in new and re-understanding our way of lives, and where are we heading to? We call it the Feminist Academy, but it's in Haifa. And of course, all kinds of new other institutions, like, for example, egalitarian synagogue, which is entirely, it's something new that the Jewish tradition didn't know about for centuries. And now we have an egalitarian synagogue. Also, partnership between Israelis, Jordanians, and Palestinians through the NGO called Eco Peace Middle East, that they collaborate, young people collaborate across the border in the southern part of Jordan River to keep ecology, to preserve the ecology, to respect nature and to impact the way the government or official authorities deal with this area. So, and I see it's and I think that and I mentioned only a few of the new initiatives of Generation Y. My daughter here is with us, and she's one of this process, and I'm really proud of her and of her friends that really make real attempt to build new institutions. I think what I call the communal family, or the familial community, because the new communes are a new kind of family. They are not based on nuclear families. They are a new kind of family. They built a new institute of the Institute of Family from below, and you can see many such examples in other area too. I don't want to get into this now, but that's why. Although I'm well aware of the many crises we confront, and the failure of the government to really to protect us from illness, from pandemic, from whatever. That's why I'm optimistic, because I believe in the young generation, Generation Y, and Generation Z, of course. That's why I'm optimistic. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Aurelia. And now is your chance to pose questions or comments for our speakers by emailing them to the address on your screen. And while people are composing their questions, let me just sort of start the discussion off by raising the question of, even in the United States, we see a lot of the solidarity economy, cooperative practices, and ethics of caring being practiced now during this pandemic. But we also see the opposite. The United States is a very individualistic society, and that individualism has been exploited by our demagogue in chief, by making the not wearing of masks as a political statement. That's an extreme example, but the fact that people have responded to that does reveal sort of the underside of US society, in which there is such a strong individualism where people look out for themselves first, with little regard to the consequences for others. Would either of you like to comment on how to combat that individualism?
I'll jump in. I think it's partly individualism, but it's also that there are forces, political and economic and social forces, that are pushing this, right? It doesn't, nothing happens in a vacuum. So there's a reason why, I mean, we all know this, right? There's a reason why individualism and blame and hatred is being fanned. So I would say something that solidarity economy, the movement globally, certainly in the United States, is grappling more and more with is, for a while, the focus really was a little bit more on these practices. Exactly the kind of practices that Erella was talking about. It is hopeful, but we also know that it's not enough, right? That building these practices is really important, right? But at the same time, there are these social movements that are engaged in the fight, right? They're engaged in the struggle. They're engaged in the resistance. And it's important for us to bring these two pieces together, because just doing the build isn't enough. And I guess the other thing is in terms of solidarity economy, like the values we talk about, they're all interconnected. So it isn't enough just to build lovely alternatives that are, even if they are grounded in these, I mean, I love that, right? I love the gift and the maternal and the indigenous perspective. But I think if you're not bringing in the equity piece, a lot of these things, at least in the United States, a lot of these lovely practices tend to happen in more affluent communities where people have the wherewithal to do this. So there needs to be this conscious centering of that equity piece. But none of it is going to last. It'll all get stomped unless there's also the joining up with the social movements and resistance.
I would say that it's individualism is one of the cornerstone of Western civilization and capitalism, you know, and patriarchy. I think it began with patriarchy, but this is another story. But so I think we have a great goal to achieve. I mean, we have to change the world. But I think that what I learned from Generation Y is just do the job. You know, start changing the world from below. Don't wait for it. Don't talk about it. It's important to talk. It's important to write books. I do write books, and some young people read them and they love them, which is great. You know, and it changed their mind. But I want more and more people, including older people. For example, we have elderly cooperatives or elderly communes, living together, and I think that and especially now under all the demonstration we see all over the world, we see that it's a rebellion against not only against Orban in Hungary and Trump in America and Bibi in Israel. It's a rebellion against the Western civilization, and I think people understand it. Young people especially understand it, but to get out of individualism and to move towards gift economy, the only way is to live it, to live up to it, to exercise gift economy, to live in a gift economy environment. I mean, you cannot say I'm a gift giver and sit at home. You have to live up to your dreams, and it takes time. It takes time, but I see it's happening, and I think that I think the demonstrations are really the rebellion. It begins, the demonstration begin the transition.
And that leads us to the first question that has come in from Melissa Young for Emily. She asks, can you bring us up to date about how the solidarity economy is developing in Canada, Latin America, and elsewhere?
A little bit. Canada, I mean, I do think in Canada, certainly the social economy is very strong. I'm a little less sure how strong solidarity economy is. So for those of you that aren't clear on what the difference is, don't worry, it's kind of getting into the weeds, but social economy are things like cooperatives, mutual associations, and foundations, right? So it's a subset. They're collectively owned and managed, but it's a subset of the solidarity economy. And it's somewhat system neutral. Some people think that the social economy is a way to strengthen capitalism. And some people see the social economy as a stepping stone towards moving beyond capitalism. So social economy is, runs the gamut of what kind of system change people are talking about. Solidarity economy is very, very clear on an international scale level that solidarity economy is about a post-capitalist vision. So that's the difference. And so social economy is very strong in Canada. I don't know if it's as strong in terms of solidarity economy and really holding out really a more fundamental system change, transformative vision. Latin America, yeah, solidarity economy is certainly under attack. I mean, as the more progressive, radical administrations, governments have fallen. Solidarity economy has lost a lot of government support. So the clearest example is in Brazil, where they actually had a ministry of solidarity economy, and that's been dismantled, unfortunately. The work continues, the struggle continues, but it does, it's both a boon to have that kind of government support in terms of money and policies and institutions. It's also a weakness to become overly dependent, because then when there's a political change, if you're overly dependent on that, on the state intervention and support, yeah, you're in trouble. So having that really rooted grassroots foundation is important. I'll stop there.
Cliff, can I make a suggestion as to procedure?
Yes.
Well, look, there are only 16 people here. There's no reason at all that people can't raise their hands or put something in the chat box and actually have some give and take and discussion about some of these issues. Simply putting it in the email and going to the speakers creates very much of the kind of paradigm that we want to overthrow. So I would offer, I mean, I understand if there are 100 people, it makes sense to do what you're doing, but with 16 people, I don't see any reason why we can't do otherwise. People can turn on their cameras, or if they don't want to turn on their cameras, they can just put things in the chat box and they can still be speaking. And I think that would make a much richer discussion.
Karsten, I quite agree with you. And I had meant to mention that if those who are in the Zoom room want to pose their questions themselves, you can do so. There is, isn't there a hand raise symbol down here? I don't see it. But if
Can we raise hands?
you can raise
Put something
hands,
in,
and if I have all 16 of you on a gallery view, then I will see the raised hands. But right now we do have another question that has come in, and where is it? I thought I had it here. Let me share. It has been suggested that people want to see concrete examples of alternative approaches. And I want to point out that the Center for Global Justice, half a dozen years ago, had a conference, Moving Beyond Capitalism. And the results have been published as a book now, which is available. And I would encourage you to get hold of that. If it's an effort to try to explore alternative institutions that can be created in the nooks and crannies of existing society, where they can't be easily stamped out by capitalism, but do offer a vision of an alternative that can then grow, perhaps. Okay. Is there anyone in the Zoom room that wants to raise a question? Wave your hand at me if you do. You have to have your video on so I can see that. Well, while you're getting that, oh, okay, Michael. Michael, if you will unmute yourself. Michael Leibowitz.
Fine. I think we probably all agree on the desired vision, a vision of a solidarian society, a gift society, etc. The central question becomes one that Cliff is basically pointing to, which is how do you build those institutions? How do you build that? What institutions are most critical for creating the new relations among people that are desired? Cooperatives are very important in terms of changing the relationships within the work process, but there is a tendency within capitalism for cooperatives to generate a collective atavism, in that they focus simply on the needs of the people in the particular collective, but still retain a view of others as competitors. In contrast, building on the local neighborhood, in ways such as, participatory budgeting or in the construction of neighborhood parks, etc., does immediately move in the direction of changing relations among people. And the question is, and this is, I think, what Erella is pointing to. This is a way of placing the development of cooperative production activity within a context which begins from the concept of solidarity. So I wonder if you both could address that.
I want to comment about it. I find that among all the new institutions that are built from below, I find the communes the most interesting and the most important. And it's interesting that you mention neighborhoods. I think that I'm talking about urban neighborhoods. I think it's very important, and you can see the beginning of it. It's very important to divide the city, because most of the population in the world live in urban areas, in cities, in mega cities, in cities. I think it's important to divide the cities to neighborhoods and to build communes in every neighborhoods. For example, if you talk in architectural terms, there is the concept of superblock. I don't know if you know it, but you take certain area and you block it to private cars, except the private cars of the people who live there, and you kind of make a communal decision making. Communal decision making and consensual decision making is very important in this process. Very important, very crucial. That all, and I saw it in Mexico when I visited Cliff and his center. They took us to another town to see how the whole town, the commune take a decision together to be presented at the city council. And I think we already have not all, but we know what the method, like super blocks, like all kinds of neighborhoods that, especially now, I think, during the pandemic, even we have the social distancing. We can build, think about a five-story high apartment building. You can make a communes out of it. You can make a commons, and you still can protect yourself from the pandemic. We have parks. We can now. I know that in Israel they want to send in the students in schools to study at parks, in public parks, so they will be in fresh air and not closed not closed in rooms or in school rooms. This is the same. We can take the 10 families that live in our buildings and meet together in a park together, or in the garden somewhere, and talk and see how we can live together, what we want, what are our needs, how we can help each other, how we can use the gift economy among others, how we can support each other, especially if there are. I suggested, for example, in the center of Haifa, where I live, the city of Haifa, there are quite many elder people. I suggested to get them together and make a communes in the central park of Haifa. And there are parks and trees all over Haifa. Haifa is full of trees and nature. And you can meet and make a connection between them and see what their needs are and how you respond to their needs. And you build communes. But the point is to understand. I think the communes are the most important part of even of solidarity economy, I think. I think one of my vision is the Venezuela. I talked with Cliff about it, the communal state, right? That's the name, the communal state that Chavez began, and of course it made the United States crazy, because it's very dangerous for United States to have a communal state. But this is the vision, and we can do it. If Chavez could do it, and they still keep it, we can do it also. We can do it also. I think we need the willing. We need the intention. We need the intention. We have the ideas.
Michael, do you want to comment on that?
Well, the only comment I would make would be to reinforce that. I worked for 7 years in Venezuela and observed the establishment of what were called the communal councils, with 100 or 200 families in the urban area and 10 to 15, 50 in the rural areas. And those were extremely democratic processes in which you could observe people developing their capacities through their interactions. And the next step in that process was to create the potential for the development of communes, in which 10 or more, I don't know whether it was a limit of 10, but in any event, in which individual communal councils would come to recognize that because the problems they dealt with transcended the little area that they represented, that they came together and formed communes. And those communes are probably the most healthy thing that continues to exist in the horror that is Venezuela right now, because they're both in urban and rural areas, and they do engage in collective work processes, but they do so in the context of a recognition that they're all part of a commune. So I certainly agree with what Erella was saying, and it's one of the things that continues to, I think, inspire people, even at this particular point, which people can see if they ever go online to VenezuelaAnalysis.com, because that basically explains what is happening with the communes and the problems they're having with the existing Venezuelan state.
Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, it's pretty remarkable that that kind of communal spirit has been able to survive in the face of all of the pressure and that has been applied to people in their daily lives, shortages, etc. And yet people, rather than going off on their own, looking out for their own self-interest alone, are working with others to provide for their needs collectively. Is that accurate?
Oh, yeah, no, it is accurate. And one of the things, but they're under great difficulties. One of the things that communes developed were relations between rural communes and urban ones, in which they were bringing the products of a rural commune to the urban areas and engaging in various kinds of, solidarian exchange. That is very difficult at this particular point because of the gasoline shortages. And so the rural communes are in fact unable to provide, to a great extent, unable to provide their resources to the urban areas. So they're under great stress, but I cannot imagine a situation in which, in the absence of the communes, that the society could not have fallen apart.
So just on that point, because it's very interesting, I was in Argentina when there were still like the remnants of these kinds of neighborhood communes, collectives that had formed when the economy collapsed. And I'm thinking about just like want to understand more about the relationship between the collapse of the capitalist economy and then the war that the capitalist economy wages against these alternate solutions. It's like, because now in Venezuela, the reason they don't have any gasoline is because the US seized all those tankers from Iran and because they couldn't get the parts to fix their own oil facilities. So, I mean, it's a blockade, right? So anyhow, yeah, I'd just like to hear if there's, Erella, you said something about trying to do these things, or maybe it was Emily, do these things out of the view of the mainstream, basically, so you don't get attacked, I would imagine. That's sort of a question.
Yeah, I think right now in the United States, the solidarity economy is flying under the radar, and we're too divided, and we're too small to really have attracted much attention. And I work, like my day job is building worker cooperatives in Springfield, Massachusetts. Is the third largest city in Massachusetts. It's your typical deindustrialized city, really hard scrabble, high, all the bad metrics, right? You can imagine. And so our commitment is building worker cooperatives in struggling communities, believing that, unless we can make these models relevant in these struggling communities, we're not really building a just economy. So that's part of our commitment. So we work very closely with all kinds of sort of mainstream institutions, like hospitals and colleges and the like. People love our project. It doesn't mean well, anyway, people love it. We're talking about job creation in communities with very high unemployment, and yeah, they're all for it, given that Springfield's economic development strategies have been so bankrupt. Like their great hope is the casino, which is failing pretty badly. So right now we're okay, we're good. We can talk about all these practices in a way that we talk about democracy, we talk about equity, we talk about sustainability, we talk about solidarity, and cooperation, and that can all be framed in a way that's non-threatening and as American as apple pie. The challenge will be is if we ever amount to more, right? If we really start cohering as system change and we really start like articulating something beyond capitalism, that Buddha is going to come down, that's for sure. And so, we need to keep that in mind and be thinking about, what do we do when that boot comes down, if we're ever successful enough to warrant that kind of attention. And I would say in the United States, we're not there yet, right? We're talking about that, but there's not a really good, clear strategy of how to defend what we're building.
This that you just talked about this in Springfield, these worker co-ops. I just released about a week or two ago a radio show about the work to make worker co-ops in Rochester, New York. And they were talking about that they had modeled on one in Cleveland. So it's something that's really catching on in these basically economically failing urban areas. And yeah, they were doing also working with the university, with the hospitals to make jobs for these, projects. So
We
wow.
worked with the Cleveland Evergreen Cooperatives as well. We built on that model. I do have to caution that there are downsides to that model as well.
Well,
but
yeah,
it's
because
good
people have
things.
to cooperate, and I mean, I don't know what else there are. What are the other downsides?
So really quickly, right? It's kind of a top down model, right? Like, so you have to build a co-op that meets anchor institution demand, right? So instead of, like, if there's people in the community and they say, hey, we want to come together and whatever, right? We want to do a sewing co-op. If that's not something that the anchor institution needs, then you're doing something different. You're doing bottom up co-ops and not speaking to the anchor institution model. So I think it's good. We have to fire on all cylinders, if that's the right phrase.
Yeah.
Try all kinds of things. So for us, we started off with that model. We also now do bottom-up co-op development through like co-op education, a co-op training, and we also are focused on conversion. So taking mainstream kind of capitalist business and helping owners sell to their workers. So it's like trying.
Yeah. Right.
Bob Stone has his hand up. If
Okay.
you unmute your mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
About customers, Emily, there's a discussion in a group called Progressive International, which inaugurated itself on the 18th of September with a big global announcement by Yanis Varoufakis, Naomi Klein, and Noam Chomsky. And the topic of a global strike came up. And it occurs to me that one thing we could do on a global strike day is give our business to and convert to the solidarity economy and the gift economy, Erella's alternative, and all sorts of other commons and sharing ways of meeting needs aside from renting labor and exploiting it to do so. How do you like the idea of getting all the solidarity economies in the world listed with the Progressive International? At roughly the same time, a group called Tricontinental Institute for Social Research, headed by Vijay Pershad, made a similar move from the anti-imperialist side. You suddenly, solidarity economy would suddenly go from 0 to 60 pretty quick. What do you think?
That's beautiful. Let's do it. There's also a people strike in the United States, sort of Cooperation Jackson is at the heart of that. So putting these all together, that's a great idea. I love it. Great.
There is a people's strike?
People strike, check. Yeah, you could just Google people strike.
Okay.
Yeah. You all know Cooperation Jackson, right?
Right. Maybe People's Strike should be in touch with Progressive International too. Point is, we seem to be facing a collapse pretty quick, according to Rick Wolf. And we need an alternative globally. And it's a problem of communication, but we've got the means of communication nowadays. We're doing it right now. That problem can be solved. I'm glad you like the idea. Do you know who I'm talking about? Yaris Varoufakis and the Progressive International?
I don't know Progressive International as a formation. I hadn't heard of that before.
Please
And I don't know
Google.
that, I know Vijay Prasad, but I don't know the tricontinental thing.
Yeah, it's headquartered in Havana and traces its history back to the tricontinental meeting in '66.
I'm looking for other hands. Oh, Karsten.
I have a question and then two comments. The question is to Emily. I really like your description, your sort of analogy of the caterpillar turning into the butterfly with these imaginal cells. One part of that question is just, is that a term you coined or is that actually a term? But that's not the main question. So I like that term, imaginal cells. But what has to happen is these imaginal cells have to join together in some way to become the butterfly. So if I play out the analogy, it can't just be that there's under the radar a lot of different solidarity economies, and then we just imagine them in a quantified form, developing more and more and more of them. We have to have some way of seeing how the whole set of solidarity economies come together the way you're using the idea of the imaginal cells come together to create the butterfly. Because if they don't come together, we don't get the butterfly. So that's my general question. I have just two comments, if I may. One is just to pick up on something Erella said. If we're talking about indigenous knowledge and challenging the Western paradigm, what we're really talking about is what, in my terms, I would call a fundamental spiritual transformation, not in a sense of anything mystical, but in a whole new way of consciousness and being in the world. And then the obvious question is, what kinds of spiritual resources can we imagine helping to do that? I come from a position where I don't think that simply changing the economy, and even in very both micro and macro ways, is going to alone do that. And the last thing I wanted to say is the whole idea of having this two sets of talks was to address COVID and the opportunity of within COVID, right? Crisis is also an opportunity to develop new ways of communicating, new visions, and so on and so forth. And so far, I haven't heard much talk about that, and I would like people to address that. So I have those are questions, one question and two comments.
So I'll start. Yeah, absolutely. I did not coin imaginal cells. It's a real thing. You can look it up. There's papers written, biology and yeah.
It's a biological note.
Yeah, or imaginal discs is also what they call it. So it's a real thing. Mm-hmm. So how do you get this coming together, this clumping? So one is just is solidarity economy is an attempt to provide a framework, to provide a skeleton where you can start you can kind of start glomming onto and coming together to work together to this transformative vision, but it is not overly prescriptive, right? It's going to look different in different times, different places, different cultures, different political, economic realities and social realities, right? So it's like that thing of the Zapatista, a world within which many worlds fit, right? So that's partly just a framework, and then there's like a huge array of specific things, right? Like, for example, building solidarity economy supply chains, right? Like, how do you get one solidarity economy enterprise to be sourcing from others, right? And there are some examples of that. But look at it, there's a whole ecosystem of work to be done. It's not just one thing. There's no magic bullet. It's like, do everything right now. Things are so dire, right? Do everything, make alliances where you can without being co-opted. Just have to do it all. And different people have different tendencies. Like, I don't really like electoral politics, but there's lots of people doing electoral politics. You know, right? We all have we can stay in our lanes, and a few places like Cooperation Jackson are trying to do it all. They're trying to do the electoral political strategy. They're organizing like resistance and community organizing, and they're doing the build of solidarity economy. But we don't have to, right? It's like an ecology. We can also be in our niche, and that's all important.
It's
I
like
want,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I want just to say that I'm not talking about only changing the economy. I'm talking about a new civilization. I'm talking about the end of the Western civilization and building a new civilization. I'm talking about new social order, new economic order, new political order, new value system, new paradigm, new culture. It's not new, it's new to me. I mean, it's new to me as a Western. Indigenous and matriarchal people know for centuries know about it. So I'm talking about changing everything, building everything from this, at least the three sources I mentioned: the gift economy, the modern matriarchal studies, and the indigenous knowledge. I think we need to change everything, but we cannot do it in one day. That's why I like what the Generation Y is doing. They are building it part by part, by a new institution here, and a new educational system, and a new knowledge center, and this is very important. A new work environment, and I think that's a good way. It's not. I know that it's not a great leftist or communist ideology. I mean, there's no great ideology. They don't have a great ideology. They do it one thing by one, you know, just, and this is what's so fascinating about it. But yes, I'm talking about a new civilization, a new way of living, new way of thinking, new way of doing, new everything. Alternative, I say it's new to me, it's not new for indigenous people. So it's very important to.
That's what I assumed you meant, which is why I asked the question about, well, this is a fundamental spiritual transformation as well. And then the question part of that would be, well, okay, then we need certain spiritual resources to move us in that direction, not just reorganize economic structures.
You know, in 2004, I co-organized with some feminist friends what we called Conference of Connection. We talked in 2004, it was quite a while ago, about fighting against issues of war and peace, ecology and injustice together, combined, and also building something new on the basis of the three areas. We talk about the connection. Now we call it intersectionality, you know. But now there is a new. But we called it. We had the wonderful hundreds of activists came to talk about the connection of our struggles and how we combine them to one struggle, and how we use the knowledge to build together a new system, a new civilization. So I think that's the right way. It's not going to take one day or 1 month. It will take a long time. But I think we have to recruit. We need many people to join us to do the work.
We have one last question that has come in on the email. from Sheila Reed, or a comment really. She thanks Emily and Erella. You've given us a lot to think about. Here in British Columbia, Canada, we've just had an election in which the Social Democrats, NDP, have just won a majority victory. They won it for their handling of COVID-19 and the social policies that have accompanied it. However, there was little mention of their continuing to approve the logging of old growth forests, fracking, and pipelines. Should the Green Party continue to focus on these inconsistencies, lies, or put its main focus on the creation of new institutions supporting mother economies? Our Green Party supports all the community values you're speaking of. Okay, Frida, do you want to respond to that?
Well, I live in BC, so I just voted in that election, and I'm very conscious of what's going on with it. And I think that the Green Party would make a mistake if it goes on attacking things. I think that the attack mode that was evident, or at least on the radio, by the Green Party didn't help its cause in this last election. And I think that going positive and building, I mean, we've seen where parties have a good idea, and even if they're never in power, the party in power will take up the idea at a certain point because it's so popular. So I think the Green Party will do well to continue. I mean, they can raise these issues in a way that's not just attacking the opposition, but building their own coalitions. And I just want to add that there's a new leader of the federal Green Party in Canada who looks very interesting. I think she could be a prime minister someday.
Well, we've just about used up our time, but Karsten, do you want to
Yeah, just to add to
say
that,
one more thing?
I assume, I don't know how many of you are in the United States, I'm in New York City, but we are facing the possibility of a legal coup that is done through the legal machinery, in which we may elect Biden, and then it somehow gets overturned by state legislatures and courts and maybe the Supreme Court. And just to address that question, when I listen to Biden talk about we're going to continue fracking, I cringe, but this simply is not the time to attack him or propose an alternative to him, because right now, what we're facing is the possibility of some kind of fascism. And that we need a united front right now. Later, if he wins, and if we don't get a legal coup, then we can attack him. So I think it's timing and context, not just, what do we do in abstractly? And this is not the time to be doing anything, at least in the United States context, but trying to make sure that he gets elected, and that if there are attempts by the Republican to undo it, that we have masses of people in the street to make sure that the coup does not take place. And there are many examples where coups have been attempted and enough people in the street have stopped it. And so this is the time for unity, even when they talk about fracking.
On the question of fascism, authoritarianism, some of you may be aware that earlier we had a webinar on that topic, and you may want to look on our website and view it. Right-wing populism, authoritarianism, and fascism, with Bill Fletcher, and it was a very interesting panel. Excellent discussion. Okay, to close off this session, let me ask our speakers if you have any final words, Erella or Emily, any closing words?
Let's keep the hope. I believe in hope. We must remain hopeful and keep our vision. Vision is our compass and hope is our
Motivator.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say thank you. This is a this was a great, fun time and a good discussion. Appreciate all the questions, really thoughtful questions and comments. And so thank you, everybody. Yeah,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
thanks to the speakers and Cliff and Bob. It's really nice to see you. If only virtually.
I want to give a special thanks to Emily and Aurelia for their presentations and participation in this discussion. And I hope that all here, as well as those viewing it on YouTube, enjoyed today's program. You should know that all of our revenue-raising programs have been canceled due to coronavirus. Nevertheless, we continue to pay our Mexican staff. So if you can make a tax-deductible donation, please do so at our website, globaljusticecenter.org. I want to thank our Global Justice team that makes these webinars possible. Liz Mestras, Gregory Diamond, Roberto Robles, Coletta Moria, Olivia Canales, and yours truly. Today's webinar, as well as past programs, are available on YouTube, accessible at our website. But next week, we're not going to have a webinar. Next Monday is the eve of the election, and we figure everybody's preoccupied with that. But the following week, we will have a discussion of the crisis of liberal democracy with Jerry Harris and myself. That's Monday, November 9th. We'll all be on standard time by then. And the following week, we have another very interesting election-related webinar that it will be coming up. A distinguished panel, they'll be doing an election wrap-up and looking at the way forward from wherever we are, whatever we're at that point in time. We don't really know now. But Laura Carlson, a journalist from Mexico, Jeff Foe, an economist, Francis Fox Piven, sociologist, and Leo Panich from Canada. So tune in 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now for that panel. And stay tuned for other exciting webinars coming from the Center for Global Justice. That's it for now, and I want to thank you all as I sign off.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.